6年です。
Hi, welcome to today's episode of Asianalysis with Al.
And Helen.
As outlandish as it sounds, imagine this. You come home from work one day, and then your partner, with a full smile on his or her face, says, "If you cut off your nipple, it will grow back." It sounds like the most bizarre, darkest of a joke. But for the 21-year-old man A living in Japan, this joke of a lie would then go on to become the opening chapter of a living nightmare. In late 2025, the Osaka District Court in Japan bore witness to a trial so deeply disturbing that it absolutely horrified the Japanese public. At the center of the case was 23-year-old Saki Sato, a cosplayer and former hostess from Japan, accused of orchestrating a campaign of prolonged psychological manipulation and physical torture against her younger boyfriend. From severed limbs kept in jars to unimaginable acts of cruelty, this is their harrowing story of how a simple Instagram direct message ultimately triggered a descent into madness. Let us quickly head back to 2021. A was just a high school student back when he chanced upon the Instagram profile of the moderately popular cosplayer, Saki Sato. Finding her attractive, he sent her a simple, harmless DM, "Kawaii desu ne," meaning "you're very cute" in Japanese. He had no idea that this message would seal his fate. Now, Sato lived in the Japanese city of Osaka, while A lived hundreds of miles away in Saitama. Shortly after exchanging messages, Sato abruptly contacted A, also thinking that he looked somewhat attractive. Sato told him that she had run away from home after a huge fight with her parents. A then went on to shelter her at his family's home for a month, and a romantic relationship quickly blossomed. But little did A know, Sato was already playing a twisted game. She revealed to him that she was already seeing another man, and laid down a chilling condition for A. "I will only date the person who can inflict the deepest wound upon themselves for me." Now, this already looks like the biggest red flag, and A should have walked away from this relationship immediately at this point. However, A, back then still a teenager, was already deeply enamored with Sato, and desperate to be with her, A took a sharp to land, let's just say inflicted a physical injury upon himself. However, despite this horrific show of loyalty, Sato dumped him anyway, choosing the other man. Let's fast forward to 2 years later on April 2023. A had finally started college, and life was going good for him. But then, Sato, who recently broke up with the boyfriend whom she chose over A back in 2021, pulled A back into her life. Sato, using her charms, persuaded A to drop out of college and move to Osaka to live together with her. A's parents vehemently disagreed with his decision, but A decided to go on with the plan anyway. So in Osaka, Sato and A rented an apartment and started their new life together. However, their honeymoon phase lasted even less than a month. Sato's behavior turned violently abusive. She began beating A so severely that he fled to the local police box, covered in blood from a broken nose. Just 2 months later, during a heated argument, Sato drew a kitchen knife, slashed his face, and threatened, "I will seriously stab you." Terrified, A filed a formal police report. This led Sato to be arrested in October 2023, sending her to jail. But what we also have to keep in mind is the sheer psychological hold that Sato had on A since his teenage years. From jail, Sato begged, "I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. Please withdraw the charges." Watching Sato cry and ask for forgiveness behind her jail cell, A gave in and dropped the case. But when she was released, her remorse immediately vanished. When Sato and A returned back to their apartment, she cornered A with a sharp tool, screaming, "I have to go to jail, so you have to go to jail as well." In fear, A this time fled from Osaka and went to live together with a friend living in the Chiba prefecture. But then, Sato once again utilized her skills in manipulation, this time on A's friend living in Chiba. She told A's friend that A has been constantly bad-mouthing him, how A was just using him to live in his apartment for free, etc., which created a conflict between A and his friend, leading A to be kicked out of his friend's house. Sato then quickly picked A up, who had no money or anywhere to go, and they once again returned to Osaka in order to live together. But nothing changed. Sato continued the physical abuse, such as biting A's ear until the cartilage was crushed. There was consistent brainwashing during the process as well, where Sato told A that enduring pain was a form of love. However, One incident led A to yet again run away from Sato. One day, he returned back to his house, only to find that Sato and another man were, let's just say, participating in the act of physical intimacy. A was then locked out of the apartment by Sato, leading him to call the police. Sato then invited A back to the apartment, where he, Sato, and the other man, whom Sato said was her ex-boyfriend, attempted to talk things over. Sato told A that he could return back to the apartment only if her ex-boyfriend also lived together with them. A disagreed, told Sato that he was the one who signed the lease on the apartment, and thus wanted both her and her ex-boyfriend to leave. Sato's ex-boyfriend then went on to conduct severe physical assault upon A, leading A to escape himself from the situation and run away to Hokkaido, the northernmost island of Japan. But a month after A moved to Hokkaido to live with his friend, Sato called him. She told him that she will not be using violence anymore, and that she will take care of his food, clothing and shelter. A decided to trust her word and returned back to Osaka. But by this point, we apologize on the direct wording, but A had effectively become Sato's human pet by this phase of his life once he returned. He was not allowed to work, not allowed to go outside, and his smartphone, along with his bank book, passport and cash, was put away in a safe. On top of all of this, Sato installed a pet camera inside the house so that while she was at work, she could constantly monitor A using her smartphone. And according to the court documents and subsequent investigative reports, this was the point when Sato's abuse mutated into legitimate stomach-churning torture. First came the scissor mutilation, convincing A of the absurd biological lie that human nipples could magically regenerate like lizard tails. She used a pair of scissors to, let's just say, detach his left nipple inside the apartment bathroom. When A shouted in pain, Sato forced a towel into his mouth, took a photo of her work, and sent it to her friends and colleagues. She prohibited A from visiting the hospital, so simply put a bandage on the wound. And as grotesque as it is, she then fed the piece of flesh to her pet dog. 3 weeks after this incident, A suffered an even more painful abuse. While Sato was looking through A's smartphone, she found the record of A calling a S-work establishment during the time when they were separated. She told him that this was a form of cheating, and that if he wanted forgiveness, he had to, quote, cut off the ring finger on your left hand so that you cannot wear another woman's wedding ring after we break up. Now, for YouTube guideline purposes, we cannot describe the details of the event in depth. But in essence, when A could not bring himself to do the act himself, Sato later purchased an axe through mail, told A to take sleeping pills to alleviate the pain, and used it to detach the ring finger of A herself. A later confessed in an interview that this was, quote, the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life. She once again took a photo of her work on her smartphone, cooked some part of it on a frying pan and ate it, while putting the rest of it in a bottle containing alcohol disinfectant. According to the Osaka Prefectural Police, the bottle containing A's ring finger was found in the refrigerator of their home. And on January 28, 2025, the third and final assault incident that led to Sato's arrest occurred. Sato had recently traveled to South Korea for cosmetic nose surgery. When her nose began to ache, she directed her rage at A, screaming that if he truly loved her, he should be willing to suffer the exact same level of pain. She then backed him into the corner of their apartment with a horrific ultimatum. If you cannot break your own nose, then let me punch your nose and ears 10 times each, with a clenched fist. A initially resisted, but as always, fear took over, which led A to eventually follow Sato into the bathroom. Again, we cannot describe the event too graphically, but a lot of assault ensued, leading A to run out of the bathroom with his nose completely covered in blood. However, Sato's rage still did not subside. She began smashing drinking glasses on the floor, which led A to try to restrain her by pushing her onto the bed. This act only added to Sato's fury, which led her to strangle their pet dog. Desperate to not have his dog die, A tried to pull Sato away from their dog, leading A's hand to graze Sato's nose during the process. And with that, Sato grabbed the phone and called the police. When officers from the Sonezaki Police Department arrived, they separated the couple to take statements. Sato told them that her boyfriend had been violent again and requested the officers to take him out of the apartment. However, the responding officers immediately noticed deep, jagged physical scars carved into A's face. When they asked him what happened, A quietly replied, "She cut me with a kitchen knife before." When the officers asked why she did such a thing, A responded, "She told me she likes people with scars on their faces and wanted to create one on me." Meanwhile, Sato refused to cooperate with the police. And although she was the one who called the police to ask them to escort A out of the house, seeing how the police were showing more sympathy towards A, she tried to stop A from heading to the police station, shouting at A, "Don't you leave this living room. Don't tell them anything. If you leave, we're breaking up." A nonetheless followed the officers to the Sonezaki police station, where he confessed everything. By the time the Japanese police went to arrest Sato, she had already fled to her ex-boyfriend's house and successfully evaded law enforcement for a number of days. And during this time on the run, she hired a defense lawyer and was already creating legal strategies on how she would respond to the police and prosecution. 3 weeks after the incident on February 18th, 2025, Sato was arrested by the Osaka Prefectural Police on 3 different assault charges. Sato's initial legal strategy was the complete denial of the 3 assault charges. She told the police that A detached his own nipple, bought an axe himself, then went on to cut off his own ring finger, and that he first tried to strangle her, leading her to hit him in the ears and nose in self-defense. She even had the audacity to claim that A's nipple grew back after about 10 days. So at this point, we can see that Sato still did not realize the full gravity of the situation and the charges that she was faced with, and believed that she could receive a not guilty verdict by lying her way out. But then, Sato and her lawyer later went on to completely reverse their stance, with Sato admitting that she had committed all of the 3 assaults listed in the indictment. However, she still went on to claim that A gave consent to all of the acts. Here, we can see the change in Sato and her lawyer's legal strategy, seeing how there was way too much physical evidence against her, A's finger in the jar, all of the physical injuries and scars left on A's body, the videos of her inflicting injury upon A and hysterically laughing and mocking him, the list goes on, most likely made her and her lawyer feel that continuing to deny all charges and fight for a not guilty verdict was increasing the chances of Sato serving real prison time. To elaborate, in the Japanese legal system, the element of penitence and reaching a settlement with the victim are 2 important factors in which a judge considers on deciding on whether to give the suspect a prison sentence serving real time or a suspended prison sentence on probation. If the suspect continues to deny all charges and fails to show remorse for his or her crimes and refuses to settle with the victim, the possibility of a prison sentence serving real time becomes exponentially higher. However, if the defendant shows penitence for their crimes, apologizes to the victim, and reaches a financial settlement with them, they will still receive a guilty verdict with a technical prison sentence, but it becomes more likely that the prison sentence will be of a one that is suspended in nature, and the defendant can then serve his or her sentence out in society on probation without actually having to head to prison. Sato also reached a 3 million yen settlement with A, under the written clause that A would not object to Sato receiving a suspended sentence. On her final day of the trial, Sato verbally admitted in front of the judge and the audience that she had been, quote, lying all this time. And with that, her trial concluded on June 19th, 2026. Judge Yusuke Fujinaga of the Osaka District Court sentenced Sato Saki to 3 years in prison, suspended for 5 years with probation. According to those who witnessed her trial, Sato stood up with a broad smile on her face after the final verdict of a suspended sentence was delivered, skipped in excitement, and threw up victorious V signs with both hands. So much for showing penitence. Now that we are aware of the details of the story of Saki Sato and A, what can we then take away from the story of their life? We believe our initial point of takeaway is one of a more personal level that goes beyond national boundaries. For anyone who is partaking in a toxic, abusive relationship, you have to have the courage to be able to walk away. For us, A's constant decision to return again and again to Sato while enduring all of her abuse could seem to be quite a strange pattern of behavior. However, for A who has been progressively groomed and brainwashed by Sato since adolescence, the decision to walk away might not have been so simple. According to the words of A from an interview, he confessed that he has lived his entire life perpetually being brainwashed by statements such as, "That is why you deserve to get beat. That is why you deserve to get bullied. You are not worthy of living. You are only alive because you're being kept alive." He said that as a young adult just out of adolescence who was forced to drop out of college by Sato, he had quote nothing to eat, nowhere to run, and all money taken away. He said that during that phase of his life, he was genuinely scared of what will happen to him if he was truly abandoned by Sato. And the occurrence of such deleterious brainwashing in a relationship by one partner against another is not only limited to Japan. So if we see such a relationship manifesting around us in our life, it is our outright duty to help. And of course, if you ever find yourself in such a relationship, please do not suffer alone and seek help immediately. Now, there is no doubt that Sato's horrific crimes deserve absolute condemnation, but her open trial also forced everyone in the courtroom to confront another dimension of the reality. Behind the mask of this emotionless, sadistic being that Sato seems to be was a childhood shattered by her own biological mother. During Sato's trial, Sato's adoptive father appeared in court as a character witness and spoke about Sato's upbringing and family environment. According to the father, Sato's mother showed extremely violent tendencies against Sato since her childhood. Sato was often punched in the face by her mother, had a metal trash can thrown at her, leading her head to bleed, had her finger broken by her mother, was chased by her mother with a sharp tool. The list of relentless physical abuse just goes on. Sato's mother was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for 3 years, starting from around the period when Sato entered high school, and the father confessed that Sato was often taken into protective custody by Child Protective Services during her childhood. Her father said that her mother's mental instability was essentially identical to the one in which Sato currently had and portrayed through her behavior. Now, would Sato have grown up to be a normal adult if she came from a stable, loving family? We cannot say for certain. But what we can say is that during her formative years, the years when a child should be learning what safety and stability feel like, she was literally taught that love is violent, visceral, and destructive. Hence, Helen and I believe that the case of Saki Sato is a firm reminder of why child mental health and early intervention are so critical. As in, I'm sorry that I cannot phrase this in a more eloquent fashion, but when a child suffers the entirety of their formative years in an abusive home, the trauma doesn't just magically vanish when they blow out the candles on their 18th birthday. These wounds will forever have a negative impact on their neurological wiring, perception of reality, everything, often leading them to repeat the exact same horrors onto someone else, just as how Sato committed onto A. So we believe that our case of today's video teaches us that protecting a young individual from physical violence and psychological abuse is not just about saving one vulnerable life today. It is literally about, without any exaggeration by the way, stopping a generational cycle of violence before it tragically transpires into a future news headline, as in the case of Sato and A. And with all of this said, we wish A a swift physical and psychological recovery. And as for Sato, we wish that she is in fact remorseful for her past actions, as she has stated during her trial, and that she never again resorts back to violence, and prove to us that even from the deepest shadows of a broken past, real, positive change is possible. With that said, you guys, thank you for tuning into today's episode of Asianalysis. And if you enjoy our original videos delving into stories from Japan that are available only in Japanese, thus uncovered by other Japan discussing channels, please make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot to us. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the next episode of Asianalysis.